Today, I will tell you a new exciting story.
Imagine a world where justice doesn't always protect the innocent, where those who suffer the most are left without support, while those who caused harm manage to avoid consequences. A world where a grieving mother, instead of receiving compassion and space to mourn, is dragged into a courtroom by the very people connected to her daughter's pain. This might sound like the plot of a disturbing movie, but it's not. This is real life. Aubrey Wyatt was only 13 years old when her world crumbled around her. She was a bright, kind, and loving girl, but the cruelty she endured from her peers became unbearable. What started as whispers and insults quickly turned into something far worse, isolating her from everyone and leaving her in a place of unimaginable despair. But just when it seemed like the worst had already happened, the true horror began after her tragic passing. The very people who had made her life unbearable found a way to shift the blame, to twist the truth in a way that defied all logic. And what they did next will leave you in complete disbelief. This is more than just another tragic story. It's a harsh reality check, a case that reveals deep flaws in the system and the devastating consequences of unchecked cruelty. Today, we're diving deep into the details of this shocking case, because stories like this need to be heard. If you believe in justice, if you believe that no one should suffer in silence, then make sure to watch this video until the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because your voice matters. And together, we can make sure stories like Aubrey's are never forgotten. Aubrey Wyatt was just like any other 13-year-old girl. She had dreams, she had friends, and she had a bright future ahead of her. But all of that changed when the bullying began. At first, it was subtle, whispers behind her back, judgmental looks, and cold shoulders from people she once considered friends. But soon, the cruelty escalated. The insults became louder, the laughter at her expense more public, and the isolation more suffocating. What made it even worse was that no one seemed to care. Teachers brushed off her complaints, dismissing them as kids being kids. Other students, afraid of becoming the next target, stayed silent. Even some of the adults in her life failed to see the deep emotional scars forming beneath the surface. The very people who should have protected her turned a blind eye, allowing the torment to continue unchecked. Aubrey tried to be strong. She told herself it would pass, that if she just ignored it, they would get bored and move on. But they didn't. The bullying only got worse, reaching into every corner of her life, both in school and online. Every time she checked her phone, there was another cruel message, another hurtful comment, another reminder that she was alone. She was trapped. No matter where she turned, the walls kept closing in. The people who hurt her seemed untouchable, and she had nowhere left to go. And then, one day, something happened that pushed her past the breaking point. Something so devastating that it would change everything forever. The breaking point came when Aubrey reached out one last time, this time to an adult, hoping someone would finally listen. She confided in a teacher, explaining the depth of her pain, the bullying she had endured, and the hopelessness she was feeling. But instead of receiving comfort and support, she was met with indifference. Her teacher brushed off her concerns, telling her to just ignore the bullies and everything would be fine. The message was clear. Her suffering didn't matter. That moment of rejection was the final straw. Aubrey, feeling abandoned by the very people who were supposed to protect her, saw no way out. She became consumed by the weight of her isolation, trapped in a never-ending cycle of emotional pain. The bullying, which had once been something she could try to ignore, now seemed like an unstoppable force that would never let her go. And so, after weeks of torment and emotional exhaustion, Aubrey made a heartbreaking decision. She decided that the only way to escape the relentless bullying, the loneliness, and the despair was to make the irreversible choice. She ended her life, leaving behind a world that failed to see her pain until it was too late. Her passing sent shockwaves through the community, but the tragedy didn't stop there. What happened next was even more unimaginable. Aubrey's death, though heartbreaking, didn't end her story. In fact, it set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. The community, rocked by the tragedy, began to question the system that had failed this young girl so completely. But just as the mourning began, something shocking occurred that would leave the public stunned. The very individuals who had tormented Aubrey, who had played a part in her unbearable suffering, made a bold and incredibly disturbing move. Instead of reflecting on their actions, instead of feeling any remorse for what they had done, they turned the focus on someone else, the very person who had lost everything, Aubrey's mother. In a move that left everyone in disbelief, the families of the bullies decided to file a lawsuit against Aubrey's mother, accusing her of emotional distress. This legal battle, which seemed to mock the memory of Aubrey's suffering, sparked an outcry from the public. How could anyone, let alone the parents of those responsible, have the audacity to do such a thing? This absurd twist only added fuel to the fire, igniting a massive debate about the boundaries of justice and accountability. It raised more questions than answers, questions that needed to be addressed. Why did the system protect those who were in the wrong? Why did it fail to acknowledge the real victims? And most importantly, how did we allow this to happen? The public outrage was palpable. The case was no longer just about a young girl's tragic death. It had turned into a symbol of everything that was wrong with the way society handled bullying, emotional trauma, and responsibility. As the legal battle unfolded, the world watched in disbelief. How could the bullies and their families have the nerve to turn the tables in such a manner? The legal system, which had failed to protect Aubrey while she was alive, now seemed to be compounding the injustice by allowing this absurd lawsuit to proceed. It felt like an insult to the memory of a young girl who had been driven to the edge by relentless cruelty. Aubrey's mother, devastated by the loss of her daughter and now faced with a legal battle she never expected, refused to back down. Despite the emotional toll it took on her, she knew that the fight for justice wasn't just about her daughter. It was about sending a message to the world. She couldn't let her daughter's death be swept under the rug or used as leverage in a cruel legal game. So she fought. She fought not just for Aubrey, but for every child who had ever suffered in silence. For every parent who had to bury their child due to bullying. For every victim of injustice who felt that their cries for help went unheard. And as the legal drama continued, a national conversation was ignited. People from all walks of life began to speak out, demanding change, demanding that the system be held accountable. The story of Aubrey Wyatt had gone from a personal tragedy to a rallying cry for change. it became clear that this was no longer just about one girl. It was about a society that needed to look itself in the mirror and confront the painful truth. How many more lives would be lost if nothing changed? The public outcry reached its peak as the lawsuit dragged on. The demand for justice was louder than ever, with voices from every corner of society calling for systemic change. Activists, teachers, parents, and students alike rallied behind Aubrey's story, determined to make sure that her death would not be in vain. They organized protests, started petitions, and called for stronger anti-bullying laws. Aubrey's mother became the face of a movement, a mother who had lost her child in the most unimaginable way, but who had refused to let her daughter's voice be silenced. She became a symbol of resilience, of the fight against a broken system, and of the love that would not give up even in the darkest of times. And slowly but surely, change began to happen. The public pressure, fueled by the strength of Aubrey's story, and the tireless efforts of those who stood by her mother, forced lawmakers to take action. New laws were proposed to protect children from bullying. Stricter punishments were introduced for those responsible, and schools were mandated to take stronger measures to address the issue. Though no law could bring Aubrey back, it was clear that her death had sparked a movement that could save future generations from the same fate. Her legacy would live on in the changes that came to pass, a reminder of the need for empathy, understanding, and compassion in a world that sometimes seemed to forget these values. In the end, Aubrey Wyatt's story became not just a tragedy, but a turning point. It was a call for change, a call to stand up for the most vulnerable, and a call to ensure that no one would ever have to suffer in silence again. If you don't want to miss more captivating stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.